Spotlight with Shadow, a Canadian dad who's got his finger on the pulse of global entertainment and sports. Each episode features unfiltered conversations with everyday creatives, musicians, wrestlers, filmmakers, and more from every corner of the globe. No fluff, just raw, real stories. This is Spotlight with Shadow, presented by Off the Top Media.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Spotlight with Shadow. Tonight, I am joined by someone I consider almost as family at this point in my time. He is the one, the only, Clayton Windatt. How are you doing, my guy?
Hey, how's it going, Shadow? It's really great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's going good. I'm glad you're here, and I'm happy to have you. We've had you on before for people that have watched this before, but we went with his indie wrestler, Rusty Blackwell. But we're not talking about Rusty tonight. We're talking about the man, the myth, the legend himself, Clayton. So, Clayton, my first question for you will be, tell me, where exactly in Canada are you from, and what was your upbringing like, my guy?
Oh, wow. Okay, well, like right now, like I live in Sturgeon Falls, Ontario, but I was born in St. Catharines, which is down in Niagara region of Southern Ontario. I was born in St. Kitts and went to school there when I was very young, like kindergarten up to grade 1 and 2. And then my family moved out of the city and we bought a farm in this little farming community called Wainfleet, Ontario, which is right between Port Colborne and Dunnville on the feeder canal. So it's like close to Lake Erie. And we lived there for a few years, and it was really interesting, kind of on this like 17-acre hobby farm, raising pigs. And this was like the 80s, so like you can imagine, like I wasn't missing out on much because there wasn't a lot of internet or too many video games anyway at that time period. So like growing up and having access to barns and fields and biking around and doing all that stuff, like it was a lot of fun. And then my father had like an injury with his back. He was working construction, and he was going to go on disability. So all of a sudden, we started looking at like financially whether we could afford to continue to live in this big old turn of the century farmhouse. And my dad opted to sell the farm and move to Northern Ontario, because we could get a house that was a little bit more affordable, and he was looking at long term how he was going to be not really working anymore. So it was like, well, let's go someplace where there's a lot of fishing and hunting and kind of settle in there. So we moved to Sturgeon Falls, and I've been in this area ever since. So that would have been like grade 5 onwards. I've been up here. So, just long enough for it to be a really, really long time, but not long enough for it to be that I was born and raised here.
Okay, so you're basically the Niagara region. So remember St. Catharines, that's only a 40-minute drive to the lake at Niagara.
Oh yeah, down there, like St. Catharines is near Lake Ontario, and then like Wainfleet was right by Lake Erie, which they're not far from each other. There's like a half hour-ish difference between those two towns. And then coming up here was like the opposite. It's like 400 plus kilometers away.
Yeah, I mean, I live right now, currently where I live is a good 300 some way from you as well. So making that trip up not long ago was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Very beautiful drive, though. Very beautiful. If you get an opportunity to go up to the Northern Ontario, by all means, take it. Especially this time of year. It's beautiful.
Well, and like people that are in like north, like so like Nipissing district, like North Bay, Sturgeon Falls, like Sudbury. These are like Sudbury is the nickel belt, but it's like these areas. These are like Northern Ontario, but for people in Northern Ontario, these are like the southernmost areas of Northern Ontario, because you can like drive for like another like 20 hours north if you really wanted to. So
I have made that drive all the way up to Dryden, and I'll tell you, and Kenora, and it's such a boring drive. But again, I reiterate, the scenery is beautiful. Just don't ever get break down in Wawa, because you won't get picked up for a long time.
Yes. Yeah. No, there are towns up north where it's like there's signs that say like if you're leaving this town, you have to have a full tank of gas because it's like 600 kilometers to the next town. And then you didn't know that ahead of time. So it's like, 1 a.m. as you're driving through the town and you see that, and then you look and you realize there's no gas stations open, and you're like, well, what are we supposed to do? And they're like, well, you stay here. And you wait for the gas stations to open because that's how it is. So like, yeah, like roaming around in Canada requires planning. I wouldn't just get in your car and start driving without like at least taking a look at where you were going to be each time you were getting gas.
I mean, at 19 years old, I hitchhiked from BC to Ontario, so it was a scary time. Different time, of course. This was many years ago now. Still scary. I remember the one distance between Thunder Bay and Winnipeg was probably the longest I hadn't seen anything. But so you're growing up in Northern Ontario or Southern Ontario, depending who you ask. What was that like for you coming from a big city up there now? Was that kind of like a cultural change for you? Like where that's it?
It was like it was a bit of a change. I mean, switching schools in the middle of like middle school was like, it was socially challenging. It was a little weird though too, because like they hadn't put standardization of like elementary schools into place, so they didn't have like standardized tests or standardized grading between the districts. And there was this whole thing where it's like when I was switching schools when I was young, I failed grade 2, which is like a weird thing to think about. Like, how is it possible for you to fail grade 2? But then when I moved up here, I skipped grade 7. So I did grade 2 twice, but never took grade 7. And that was because when I got up here, they were like, why is Clayton in grade, as I'm in grade 5, they're like, why are you in grade 5? Shouldn't you be older? And I'm like, oh, I failed grade 2. And they're like, really? But you're not like struggling with any of your grades. So what is it? And I'm like, I don't, moving around, it does it. And then when it came time, like, what was it? I went into grade 6 and it was like grade 6, 7. So they had like a split class. And then when I left that class, they just put me into grade 8. So it was weird, but it was an adjustment, and yeah, fun stuff.
So we fast forward to high school. I'm assuming you're a degreed man in that sense.
So I went to high school in Sturgeon, and then I went to high school in North Bay because my parents got divorced, and then I went to school in Sturgeon again because I had moved out on my own and started my own family at 18. My first child was born when I was 18 years old, and I had to finish school after having kids. So I was working part-time and going to school part-time, and then went to college, went to Canada College. And it was one of those things where you like go to college because you think you're supposed to go. Like, everyone's saying you need to get a college education. There was such a push in my generation for everyone's like, you have to go. And, I didn't really have any reason to go or what I wanted to do, but it was fine. I went in and they had like a booklet where you choose what classes you're going to apply for. And I looked through the booklet, and I always liked to draw. So I chose graphic design as like the first choice. And my second choice was police foundations. And my third choice was helicopter pilot. And if I wouldn't have got into graphic design, I would have been a cop. And if I wouldn't have gotten into police foundations, I would have been a pilot. But I got into graphic design. So very different life paths could have unfolded right there. But yeah, went into graphic design, graduated, had more kids, went back to school for university, trying to be a teacher, realized there's no teaching jobs. So I didn't go to teachers college, even though I had a scholarship. I just went and got my undergraduate in fine art. And then flash forward many years, and during the pandemic, I actually went back to school again and got a master's degree in design for health. And a lot of people in my art circle are like, why did you do that? I'm like, because I didn't think I'd learn anything going and getting further art training. Instead, I went and learned how to look at designing systems for complex care facilities, or looking at how spatial planning for hospitals gets done, or looking at how hospital manages triage, like all these different administrative medical stuff, which was really interesting. And yeah, now I have an education in that too. And I don't know what I'm doing with any of this stuff, but making art, having fun.
Take you though, right? So,
I'm teaching a lot too, and I guess that's part of it, but we'll see.
So before I get into the formative years of your adult aging, being a young dad, did that shape who you are today? Would you credit that to?
100%. So when I was in grade 8, trying out for the football team in high school in Sturgeon Falls, I broke my neck during like skirmishes that we were having for training. And at the time, like the senior team was there helping with with these skirmishes, and I just caught the ball and got, tackled by a bunch of people, and I got up and I'm like, oh, my neck like really hurts, and didn't think anything of it and walked away and, finished the day, went home, went to bed, got up the next day. And when I went to get up the next day, my head, I couldn't lift it off the pillow. Like, it's just like there was no way of moving. And it's like my body moved, but I just couldn't lift my head. So I had to hold my head with my hands and get out of bed. And I came walking out into the kitchen and I was holding my head. And I said to my parents, like, something's wrong. You have to take me to the hospital. And I remember my dad yelling, like, you're going to school, because there's that whole thing of like, I was totally that kid who pretended to be sick all the time, try to get out of going to school. And I just like let go of my head and it just like flopped around like there, because there was nothing, like the bone was so broken that it was like destroyed. There was pieces, just little pieces. There wasn't enough to reconstruct the spine. So I was like flown to, a hospital and checked out and had all these braces put on and had to wait for like a specialist to come. And basically, they had to reconstruct my spine by taking a piece of my hip and fashioning like a new vertebrae out of my hip and putting it in the back of my neck and fusing it to the other vertebrae with wire. So it was a very brutal process. And you have to stay conscious while they're putting the halo on, which that was like unbelievable. I've never been in pain like that in my life before, and I've broken almost every bone in my body. And I came out of it, and you have this like kind of weird, like pronounced sense of like life is short and I'm going to make something out of it kind of thing. And, I'd always really liked the idea of being a dad and, raising kids. And it just kind of happened fast, but I never really felt upset about that because I kind of felt like I needed to grow up really quick at that point. And I don't know why that is, but that's how it rolled. And so, yeah, like my first child was born when I was 18, actually the day before I turned 19. And then I have 4 children, the youngest of which now is 17. So like there's a big gap, almost 10 years between the oldest and the youngest one. But they helped me to kind of, craft my identity, push me, like make it that it's like, not, having a job is kind of mandatory because you got mouths to feed, like all that kind of fun stuff. But I mean, multitasking, you can't be bad at multitasking while taking care of kids, all that stuff. Yeah,
they can't.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask this, and I won't touch on it more than what I'm going to ask. It's 3 girls and 1 boy.
That's correct. Yeah. My kids are Tracy, Ember, Johnny, and Clara. So yeah, there's a bunch of them, and the older 2 are, working and living in North Bay, and then the younger 2 are here finishing school and getting jobs as teenagers and doing all that stuff. But I'm at that wonderful age where I'm like, I'm 45, turning 46 in March. And obviously like looking at how they're all going to be out of the house very soon. So I'm going to have all kinds of like
space activities.
I guess. I don't know. Travel, I suppose. Probably just sit around and cry and look at baby pictures.
You and your wife are going to be like stepbrothers. Look at all this space. We could do activities in here.
Oh, yeah. Like, what is that? Yeah, stepbrothers. Absolutely. It'll be exactly like that.
I mean, I've met your wife. She's a lovely person. I could see her and you doing that and be like, yeah,
doing like exercises like this, like in their rooms, like just like waving our arms to like show that we have all this extra space to use. So
So I gotta ask, how did you meet your lovely wife?
So that's interesting. So I've been married before. My older two kids are from my first marriage, and that marriage lasted 7 years, and then we got divorced, and it wasn't like, the end of the world. It was more like we got married very young and kind of grew apart, and it happens. And then, I was living on my own. I was working, and I got a job at Value Village, and that's where I met Tara. She was working there at Value Village, and uh I was taking the kids to school or to their daycare, dropping them off, and I have to get to work, and I didn't have a car, so it was like this whole thing of like walking your kids to where you drop them off at the daycare, and they're like fighting you because they don't want to go, they want to stay home, and then you show up late to work and you get strikes for, like, even if you're like a minute late, that's still a minute late, and you're doing everything you can to kind of not be late, but you get a couple late notices, and all of a sudden you're getting fired. And Tara and I had talked socially just a little bit, but anyway, I was getting fired, so I'm getting escorted out of the building, and I like ran over to Tara to like give her my number as I'm being escorted out of the building and being fired. And they're like, "You're not allowed to do that." I'm like, "What are you gonna do? Fire me?" And so I gave her my number, and she waited a couple days and to call, and which is like she later told me that was like, she's trying to do that thing you're supposed to do where you don't call right away and act all like eager. And we had a couple dates, and they were like really like, we just went for walks and had cups of coffee, and it was very like kind of friendly but not like romantic. And then Tara was very forward. It's like, "I just want to know where this is going. Like, is this dates or are we just friends?" And I was like, "No, these are dates. Like, I'm very interested." And like a week later, we were living together, and we've been together 20 years this past summer, and married 18 of that. And she's my best friend. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like,
I love that story, though. Your wife is such a calming influence. I recently had the pleasure of having breakfast with you and your wife, with my wife and my children, 3 of them. We're breakfast. She's attentive. She listens. She's very interactive. She's such a beautiful soul, man. I'm glad you found that for you.
Thank you. I'm glad too. And I don't know where I'd be without her. I really don't. Like, she, anybody who watches how ridiculous and sporadic my behavior is, or gets to know me and sees how many like random and bizarre projects I'm constantly doing, when they meet her, they're like, "Now it all makes sense," because that, like, you're the person who actually must keep this all in check to a degree, because he's just like, I'm just such a mess as a person.
For reference, ladies and gentlemen, his wife also films his other life, which is his wrestling.
Oh, that's right.
She's a trooper.
She is. Wherever, there's like, behind anything that's going well, there's like literally a dozen people that are helping to make it happen that you don't even know they're there. And in some instances, when I say that, it's just Tara. It's just my partner Tara that's doing that. So she's fulfilling, like, the roles of a dozen people half the time.
I know my children loved the time they spent with you and your wife when we were up there recently. It was great. Like, my kids don't take to a lot of people, and they love you, and they love you. So they know they're excited to see you soon. So
good
for that.
Good. I am excited to come visit again soon too. And Rusty has a new sponsorship with Soda Pop Brothers, Soda Pop Bros. And there's a soda that's coming out, which I don't want to talk about too much, but I should be okay. They are bottling it right now, so I have confirmation that it'll be in Windsor by the end of the month, so I can make plans around the end of the month to go and go down there and pick it up, and I can start making those plans now, as opposed to waiting for them to confirm it's in Ontario. So that's good.
Right.
I just talked to them today. That's why I bring it all up.
I'm excited for everything that Rusty does. Well, I have to ask because I have to ask this because I would be remiss if I didn't.
Okay.
When it comes to your professional wrestling career, and I don't want to talk about this too much because again, I've already
introduced. No, it's okay. Yeah.
When it comes to your professional wrestling career, where does Clayton come up with Rusty?
Oh, that's interesting. So I mean, I'll get to how the actual name came about, but I've been watching a lot of like wrestling documentaries lately, and I'm actually halfway through the Mr. McMahon Netflix series and watching that, and it's fine. I mean, most of the content that it's showing is stuff that I've seen in other formats before.
It's more of I don't understand what that was, but
yeah, that's fine. But they do talk a lot about wrestling and being like a wrestler, and how like the best kind of character work that anyone can do is like just an extension of yourself, right? Like, so like take an aspect of your personality and let it go further, right? And make it larger than life. Like you can be not like an outspoken person, but what aspect of your personality can you take to those kind of bigger places? And like Derek and Danny Diggler, who I've wrestled multiple times, they're rude and outlandish and kind of dirty and kind of jokey and funny, and all of those things socially, that's actually them to a degree. But I mean, in real life, obviously not even remotely the same. Like they might have a joke they make or be funny about something, but they're not that level. Like they're turning the volume up on themselves to make the Digglers. And I think that Rusty is the same for
the Young Bucks of the Northwest.
Exactly. Yeah. And
I love that reference.
Well, and and Rusty's the same, right? So it's like, let's take the loud, overly paternal, kind of like gets really frustrated and can't think straight, like all that stuff. Like these are all things that I've struggled with. Like, there's like times where when I was younger and I would get in fights, and especially when it would first start, you'd watch when I get really angry, you'd watch me not even be able to say anything, where I'd be like, you and like you just like you can't even get the words out. Like it's like I just get so angry, and just like this weird kind of manifestation of myself. And I mean the name, I struggled a lot with the name. Dan Jarris, who is the owner and manager of Northland Wrestling and now the NRGY Pro Wrestling and Academy, where I've trained, he helped me. At first, I said I wanted my name to be Bill Chainsaw, and I was going to be like this Leatherface heel character that was sort of like just evil. And everybody I was training with, like, tried really hard to not say it in a mean way, but they're like, nobody's gonna really, like, you're not really like instinctively a mean person, you're like one of the nicest guys we've ever met. Like are you really gonna be okay being, having people kind of hate you, but like not just at shows? Like you're gonna see kids at grocery stores and they're gonna be upset with you. And I'm like, I don't know if I am okay with that. Because I do run into people, do recognize me in my like local community, and like it's kind of, the interactions are kind of beautiful, so I kind of like being a face. But he said Bill Chainsaw is not really like, it's such a you just thought it was a terrible name. And he said, like, and I kept pitching other things, I kept saying other names, coming back, and he kept kind of like going like, those are all terrible. And then he said, just give me a list and I'll look through it. And I literally sat and made a list of like 50 names. It was just like this giant list. And I did it in like a Word document. And then I just pasted it into a Facebook chat with him. And in there, the name Rusty was there a whole bunch of times, and there were other names too. I think I put different things in there, like, because I was watching a lot of old school wrestling, like the Vachon brothers, like Mad Dog Vachon, Butcher Vachon. I was watching a lot of like Jerry Blackwell, and I was saying like, this is the way I want to wrestle. Like at that time, I was really referencing how I'm like, I really want to wrestle like it's 1979 or 1980, like that type of wrestling where it was like, it was very slowed down. When you hit someone, you're hitting them strong style, like you are really hitting them hard enough that it's like this person needs to either go with it or get concussed. Like this is how this is my early training. Like this is where I was at mentally to try to provide a role. And in the list, there was a lot of times where I had said Rusty in the name, and Dan came back in the chat just saying like, why are you saying Rusty so much? And I said, well, the name, my father's name was Russell Windatt, and his nickname was Rusty. So like, and he passed away in 2010. So a lot of people that know him or know our family, they would get the reference to me calling myself Rusty very quickly. And it would be like, the people that know that, they kind of find that to be like a weird, beautiful, homage to my father kind of thing. And then his response was in the chat just to be like, well, why don't you do something like Rusty Blackwell or the Backwoods Butcher, something like that. And I just saw them right there, Rusty Blackwell, the Backwoods Butcher. And I was like, then, I came to class like a couple days later, and he's like, so what did you think? I'm like, I already bought the .com. Like I registered, like I made a logo, like this is done. Like it was like, no, like I'm not having Rusty Blackwell, the Backwoods Butcher. Like he came up with it. It's done. Like it's my, I'm like, it fits. It's perfect. And he was like, oh, what, both of them? I'm like, no, like it's done. Like I've paid money. Like the website's registered. I made t-shirts. Like it's done. So I loved it so much, and I just ran with it. So anyway, that's how the name came in. And yeah, it's a little interesting, like, having like my nephews or my kids who know who my dad was, seeing me using his name. It's interesting, it's beautiful, it's sad, but it's it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that part, and that hits hard. I mean, I lost my dad in 2005. I was 14, so
Wow.
I get it. I don't go by the nicknames he did or anything like that, but that's beautiful. You must have had a really great relationship with your dad to honor him that way.
I don't know if he might think, wherever he is out in the universe, he might think we had a great relationship. I'm sure. I mean, by the time he passed, because he was sick for over a year, I had got everything I needed to said, and I had got to that place where we were good. And I don't think we were always good, but that's the one thing about having time, is that you spend what you can with it, and that doesn't there's other people that I wish I would have had that time with, and I didn't. So it's just one of those things. If you have somebody that is in a hospital and it's looking rough, and you're like, life has got you busy, like, don't wait, don't think you're gonna have another couple days to take the time to go see them. Like, go see them. It's not, life's too short to waste 9 to 5ing it while people you care about disappear.
See, I got to take a second here because that kind of hit hard. So
yeah,
because I didn't get that time with my dad. He suddenly passed, and me and him were literally arguing the night before he passed away. And some things were said. I'm not going to repeat them here. I'll tell you off air. I feel comfortable telling you. I just don't want to repeat it here.
Yeah.
So I never got that closure, and it took me a very long time to accept that. And then with my grandma passing away in the last 7 years, she was in the hospital, and I was supposed to go see her the morning she passed.
Yeah.
But we had gotten a snowstorm come through, and I couldn't get there. Well, I didn't feel comfortable driving over because she was a town over. And It sucks, but I made sure I
It
visited
does.
as much as I said, you know, and I did what I did. So I get what you're saying, and make sure,
Yes. Yeah.
make sure the people you love know that you love them, and make sure that you settle or not settle, but say what you need to say is basically what Rusty's can.
100%. And you know, like I could go into it more, but you know, part of it is you know, like we only got the time we have together, and part of the reason why, you know, like I even am on this show is because it's valuable to spend this time with you, you know, and that
Likewise.
these are the kind of things that it's like, you know, seize the day, all that kind of, yeah, it sounds like proactive nonsense if you're not in the moment actually thinking about it, but you know, yeah, living life is full, like, I mean, that's kind of how I got to wrestling, which is such a strange situation. I mean, like, I've only been wrestling for 3 years, and as I said earlier, like, I'm going to be 46 in a couple months. So you're like, what person in their right mind at the age of 42 decides to start being a wrestler, you know, to go and do that? I'm like, well, and the answer is I didn't think that was going to happen. Like, a wrestling school opened up, a bunch of theater guys in the area said that, you know, hey, there's this wrestling school. Do you want to go? And I said, sure. And then when I went, you know, I was over 400 pounds. I said that I'd manage, and that was my interest. You know, I could get hit with a chair. And, you know, I've been a performer and a performance artist for, you know, like 25 years. Um, so I just assumed that I would kind of be doing some kind of spectacle work on the sidelines and maybe talking for people who weren't good on the mic themselves, right? And you know, Dan said, let's take this training as far as it can go, and let's see what you got, you know. And you know, I don't train the way that everyone else does because, you know, I have this pre-existing injury, and also I'm a large person, but you know, over that time I just put myself into it. And it's that idea of kind of like, let's like take as much opportunity as we can to do what we can with the time left, which you know, it's different with, you know, my tag team partner Tommy, who's 21 and has his whole career and life ahead of him, and then meanwhile he's tagging with somebody that's like more than double his age, you know, and more than double his size, but it's really more like when he looks at like, oh, he's got, you know, he could wrestle for another 20 years or and not be as old as I am, and I'm like, I don't have that kind of time. Like, that's not realistic for me to look at it in that way. And I have to, you know, I am treating wrestling like burning the candle at both ends. You know, in the last 12 months, I've had 100 matches, um, which has been a lot. It took a lot of toll on my body just doing that. I mean, in the last 2 years, I've lost over 100 pounds. Um, and I don't think I could have kept it on. I didn't change my diet at all. You can't be this active and stay that size. It's just too hard physically to retain the weight. And part of all this was that if I was going to do it, once the opportunity of having somebody invest in trying to let you actually train at a certain level, and then have you actually be a wrestler and go further than, you know, managing or you know, being in some spots, uh, was a real honor. So I took it and ran with it as hard as I could, because I knew that if I was going to try to be, you know, any kind of wrestler at all, I'd have to put that time in as fast as I could and do as much as I could as fast as I can. And I remember I was on like my first CWE tour, which was only in January of this year. And I remember talking to Mentalo, who's the who's like their champion right now, or he was at the time. And we were sitting beside each other at the merch tables. And I was like, when you see me with all this, like, cause I have a lot of merch and I have a lot of things that I sell. And I was like, with all this, and then you see my ability in the ring, what do you think? He's like, he kind of laughed, cause he's like, he could tell I'm like baiting him into talking about like my, like talking in a negative way about my ability. And he's like, well, you look, you know, as a professional wrestler, you look a little overconfident. And I'm like, that's really awesome. And he's like, it's awesome that you're overconfident. I'm like, no, you called me a professional wrestler. and he's like, but you are. And I'm like, see, that to me, like, that's enough. I know that sounds really kind of like, I don't know, corny, but just to be considered a peer, just to be, doing the work they're doing, just to be considered to be actually a wrestler and not just somebody who's treating this like a hobby. That was a huge honor. And frankly, that's all I was ever hoping to achieve. So now everything else is just icing on the cake,
One more thing I got to touch on with that CWE stuff, because I have to.
Sure.
But somebody that's arguably a huge legend in the business, Alvio Vega.
Yeah.
Somebody that now considers you a peer. That's got to be huge.
Absolutely. 100%. Somebody that's had matches, with Stone Cold Steve Austin, matches with, Gold Dust, huge runs, owns his own company down in Puerto Rico. It's not like he chose to work with me. I was on the tour. CWE was allowing me to get pushed as a baby face because they see the value of that, specifically in Ontario markets. And then, so he came and was on I want to say a 9-day tour in Ontario. And then I went out and got on the Central Canada tour and just opted to go. And at first I said, I had like a work reason to go to Winnipeg, or no, to go to Regina. That's right. And I said, I can be there on the date that you're there. Could I get some bookings? And it was like the tour had already been set. So he's like, well, yes, but not like, unless somebody drops out, you're just going to be like taking up like essentially dark match spots, right? Because you're not like, he's not booking you. You've solicited to be there. And that's a very big difference in the way that things kind of work in wrestling, is that like when you solicit, you probably don't get the best treatment. But Danny Duggan is very considerate to the people he works with. And I don't know, I hope he doesn't get upset that I say that. I could talk about how nice he is. But the somebody dropped out. I can't remember, I think it was who was it? Chiseled Chad Daniels got a concussion the same day I showed up. So I was only supposed to be, I think, on like 4 shows before I headed out. And then I got there and I was asked to be on 6 shows. And then within a day, I was asked to be on 9 shows. And then within another day, I was asked to be on 14 shows. So then so then when it was finally done, it was like I had wrestled for like 9 days in Ontario. And then I did some other shows on a weekend, and then I flew out, and then I did 2 weeks. And then when I came back, it was like at the end of that, like the end of the month. And I'm like, I think I wrestled like 26 days out of that month. And I was just like, wow, like that's it was just total leveling me up as far as like, just like you go from kind of doing that whole thing where you have a day job and you go and you wrestle on the weekends, and you get exposure and you get experience, but then it's just not the same as like getting in a car with people and being like, you're never alone. You're literally living with the tour. And a month passes and I can't even remember half the things that we did or talked about or where I was, or I just remember the matches more than I remember the towns. Like I know I've wrestled in Calgary and Edmonton and Regina and Saskatoon and like Winnipeg and Brandon and all these other places. I know I've wrestled in all these places, but I couldn't tell you what those towns looked like necessarily. Like sometimes, like I barely remember the stuff between them, and then I can't remember which matches were which. Like I know I lost some days, and I know I won some days, and I know I wrestled this person some days, but I couldn't tell if that was in Calgary or if that was in this or this. It just became a blur. Anyway, and it was fantastic. Yeah.
So we're going to transition out of wrestling and go into the artistic styling of Clayton.
Yeah.
Huge member in the artist world here. Please, where does this come from? Like, I know you said you got into school for graphic design and stuff like that, but it takes a special eye to do the stuff you do. So please.
Well, it's interesting because it's like so I went to school for fine arts, and I went to school for like these things where you just kind of learn how to be critical and look at things a certain way. But I would argue that some of the stuff that I picked up is more like I just picked some of this up, and you kind of start to, when I say be critical, it's not argumentative. It's challenging ideas, right? So you're really like, this is like this. You're like, why? And I say why, not because I'm trying to be mean, but because it's like kicking the tires on a car. Like, prove to me that what you're saying is the right thing to say or the right thing to do, or, like, justify that to me. Because if you can't, then do you even know why you're saying it, right? And that becomes like this bigger thing, right? And I mean, that's a very simplified way of talking about like critical theory and curatorial practices and contemporary art, but that's how it kind of works. So I went through fine art in North Bay, and when I graduated, there was a gallery called the Whitewater Gallery, which is an artist-run center. And one of my instructors had said, they're having like a big meeting because they're talking about closing, and you should go get involved. And I literally just took that advice and went. And I went to this meeting, and it was so strange. Like, I had no experience in not-for-profits or gallery culture of any kind. I was just an artist. And there was this whole thing where everybody in this room was talking about how there's no money and there's no way to do things and everything's doom and gloom and terrible. But there was like 50 people in this tiny little gallery space, and they're all moping. And I was like, if 50 people want this place to be open, like, that doesn't make sense that it can't happen. Like, like, like that whole grassroots old school, like, we could just pass the hat, we could have a bake sale. Like, those kind of weird like instincts were kind of like pissing me off, that all these people were saying how much they couldn't do something instead of how they could, and just they needed to have like faith in themselves. So eventually, like, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't know, I think like 25 or something at the time. And I was kind of like, how can I get involved, and maybe I shouldn't say anything 'cause it's not my place, and all these thoughts. And then eventually somebody said something, I can't remember, it was really stupid, but I just piped up and I was like, you know what, this is so ridiculous. Like, if this place needs money, let's just find a way of getting it. If they need to write grants for the government, let's write them. Like this, it doesn't seem as like, I don't see how it's hopeless. Anyway, it was strange because it was almost like they're waiting for someone to say that, because the people who were running the place literally just threw the keys to the building on the ground and left. And that's how the board of directors, like, I ended up leading the board in, and never being on a board of directors before. It made no sense that happened. But I would say about 6 to 8 months went by, and we had some exhibitions and they were terrible, and we were trying our best, but it was not great. And then I left the board to become the volunteer director. So it was like the board would be separate, the oversight of the organization be separate from the people that are doing the work, and then that way we would be more eligible to go after government funding. Because essentially, if you have it that one person's doing everything, the government will kind of look at it and go like, this person makes all the decisions and no one else really has a say on it. So I stepped back into this volunteer role and ran the gallery for a couple of years like that. And I don't even remember how that made sense, because I was so broke at that time and didn't have any income. So I was probably like, living on social assistance and, in a geared to income apartment, like just kind of eking by. And then some of the grants we wrote were successful and they got money. So then we were going to hire somebody. And then I remember the board was like, if we hire someone, would you help them to like know how to run the place? And I'm like, let me be clear. If I'm applying for this job and if you guys don't hire me, no, I'm not helping the new person. I'm going to leave and go get a job. I'm like, how dare you? I've been volunteering for years here. Like, you're monsters if you think I'm going to volunteer to help some paid person do my job for me. And they hired me, which was the right thing to do. And I was there.
Geez.
Oh, go ahead.
I said, I'd hope so. Geez, like that's crazy.
I know. Well, this is what like oversight committees can be a little detached from the situation, right? And they are detached from it, but they this can happen, right? And I've got all those kind of stories someday that I can get into, but right now I'll just keep it very high level. But so then I was there for 7 years, and they got into a position where they had a lot more money and they were doing okay, and we did some big conferences, which I really enjoyed doing conferences. And then I was like, the contemporary art scene has this like obsession with newness, like the idea that really you don't want to stay anywhere too long because it can look like like the decision making gets boring, and this weird kind of objection that the larger arts community can have towards you holding space for too long. So I didn't leave on bad terms. I just said I'm leaving, and everyone's like, why? I'm like, well, because we're right in the middle of some grant cycles, so whoever comes in next that you hire actually will have access to a whole bunch of money that they didn't have to get themselves. And it's either like I either do that now and leave, or I have to stay for like 3 or 4 more years. And that was kind of like the rationale was like, if I leave now, it's actually better for the organization. And that's what happened. So I left, and I started working as an independent and going after grants on my own, which I failed horribly at for a long time. And then I got hired by the Indigenous Curatorial Collective, which is a national art service organization that coordinates conferences. And that was like just a weird coincidence. Like I had been involved with that organization in different capacities. I have some Indigenous heritage, which and worked with the Métis Nation before. So like this was like 2015, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission had kind of rolled out its recommendations, calls to action, and the staff at the Indigenous Curatorial Collective had quit like very abruptly, and I was asked to fill in for a short-term contract just to write their grants for them and help them get ready for their conference. And I said, sure, yeah, I'll do that. And it was supposed to be like 2 months, and then 2 months passed, and they didn't find anybody. So they said, would you stay on for another 2 months? And I said, sure. And I kept working. And then I noticed publicly they were just referencing me as the interim executive director. And I was like, yeah, I never agreed to that. But that's fine. And then a couple months passed after the 2 months, and I was like, when are you guys going to just like hire somebody? Like I've been here 6 months. It was supposed to be 2. And they're like, oh, we're getting it together. We're going to post the job. And then they did, and they posted the job, and I almost didn't even apply for it because I was just like really wanted to be an artist and do my own thing. And the Indigenous Curatorial Collective has a lot of travel. Like you have to go to all these different events all over the country and sometimes outside of the country. And it was like, it's fun, but it's also exhausting. And my family was very young still. So I was kind of like really wanted to spend time with my kids. And, anyway, and it's funny, they almost didn't hire me because there was this awesome candidate that almost got the job, and then they got a job at a much bigger, well-funded organization. And so then they called me, and I worked there for 4 years, during which time I did a lot of projects. I coordinated some huge conferences, one in 2016 and one in 2017. One in Whitehorse and one in Halifax, and they were a lot of fun. They were good. And at that same time, I got on the National Gallery of Canada's board of directors, which is like a very privileged thing. And I was there for 4 years, and then I left that, and then I left the Indigenous Curatorial Collective before that, and then during the pandemic, I went back to school, but I also got this job at the Artist Run Centers and Collectives Conference, which is like a full circle bizarre thing where my day job now is coordinating conferences for artist run centers, which the Whitewater Gallery is one. And that's where I kind of got my start in the arts. So now I'm the executive director of the National Art Service Organization that supports all the artist run centers across Canada, which is about 180 of them. And, I moonlight doing consulting work, do a little bit of curatorial practice work for some exhibitions. I make films, make art, write horror fiction, whatever I can. So it's like kind of got a day job working in the arts as an administrator, and that somehow lets me meet creative people, but spend my spare time, being a creative person, I guess, if that helps.
Yeah, that helps. It kind of gives me a roadmap, if you will, of kind of where you've gone, and it kind of eliminates like 6 questions at once there. But
well, and it's also like if every step of the way, it's totally not like this was a plan. Like I literally showed up somewhere and ended up in some position, or like I've said things to people that I'm like, and these are not like trying to be mean. It's more like I tripped and fell and got a full-time job, or I tripped and fell and someone told me I should get a scholarship to go to this school, so I just said yes. And it's like this weird, like my wife says things to me like, you've got a gold horseshoe like right up your ass. And I don't disagree with her. Well, it's just like there's times where I will say things and I will speak my mind, and I won't be malicious or attempt to be crude with my language, but I will be very blunt. And there are times where that will really upset people. And then there are other times when that exact behavior is, someone will be like, why the hell are you not doing this? And they're like, you just find that path. But it's all like one situation led to me being in the room to meet the people that led to the next, to the next, to the next. And it all started just because a teacher in a university said, you should go to this place, it's about to close. And then you got all riled up and didn't let it close. And that led to another thing, which led to another thing, which led to another. And it's just a never ending list of all these weird, me getting angry and telling someone to fuck off. And all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, I loved the fact you told that asshole to fuck off. Like it's so strange, but it is what it is. Like you never know what is it? Like, what's that's thing? It's like you fail at every chance you don't take, and
100% of the shots you don't take.
That's right. And I what a lot of like, so this sounds great, but what you don't know is that there's probably literally hundreds, if not thousands of shots that I took that all led nowhere along the way.
Well, I mean, it's crazy, right? I mean, someone of your stature in the world that you're in, which we're not going to downplay that. It's a very prestigious role.
Thank you. Yes, I try.
And you take, for instance, Off the Top Media and you're like, hey, you guys are doing good. And knowing now what I know, that's huge. Not that it wasn't huge before, but you believing in us, considering what you do, is huge for me and Scouts.
But it's important. It's important for you to see that, and to see the work that you put into yourself as being valuable, right? Like, I mean, and I say this being like, I can give this advice much easier than I can take it myself. Like, advocating for yourself and for the work you're doing from a place of love it's not easy for everybody. Like, it's not easy to love yourself and to love the things you do. And it's strange to have to say that, to talk about it that way, but it's like, you need to let be, just even if you're hard on yourself once in a while, you need to be less hard on yourself. Like, there's just all those things, because it's a trap, like this whole kind of self-loathing or self-doubt kind of behavior. It's I don't know how to say it. I feel like every famous celebrity I've ever seen says this in every talk show they're ever on, about just trying to be like proactive and support yourself. And it's like, it seems like coach, like this motivational speaking, but it's like, I see it like, it's so easy to just be negative and to say no and to give up. And the one thing I will say about the arts is that rejection is a very frequent thing. It hurts every time, but you have to get to a place where you're doing enough that you're not putting your eggs in one basket. Like, I don't apply to do one thing, and then when that rejection comes in, I have nothing. I apply to do 10 or 20 things, and then when 19 rejections come in and one success comes in, I know exactly what I'm doing.
But that's just it. Like, and I mean, in a similar sense to what you do, for me, I'll throw out 40 emails for an interview that I want to do. I'll get 39 rejections, and that one will be like, yeah, let's do it. right? And that it's kind of similar to what you're explaining. It's you can't give up on yourself. Mind you, I am my biggest critic when it comes to this stuff, and people like yourself and Scals and Will Gray and others have said, and Josh Bain and Jimmy Spike, you're doing great. You're doing great. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then I move on because I can't stay in that moment. I need to keep going.
That's great.
I'm humble enough to accept it, but I don't sit there and be like, yeah, give me that love. I push. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if I get too complacent, then I'm stuck in a standstill. I got to thrive for more. It's
good. That's another thing too about, and I say this is more about my own practice than everyone else's, but I will reference, first of all, that I am very similar in that way that I usually, when someone gives praise, I just say thank you. And then I kind of move forward because I don't, the more you kind of stand in that and bask in it, the more it kind of just like can feel weird. And, like there's a time and place for things. So like socially it's a little odd, but my practice and my arts practice specifically has to be from this place of unrest, like the idea that it can't settle, it has to keep moving. And if it were to rest, it's like, well, then it's over, right? Like, so like we were talking about big picture things, like, the simplest way I'll describe it is that it's every generation's responsibility to kind of challenge the status quo that has been put in place by the generation before them. That's just human nature. That's not a generic thing. It's not it's not unique to like any society, or it's really like the people that show up, you're like, how come everything is the way it is? Prove to me why this is the right way to do it. And by that, things change. And that's like the course of human trajectory, like over the years. Not everything that everyone says to change is the right thing to do. Sometimes we have to change it back. I don't know, but the point is, my arts practice does that, and that's why I feel grounded in it. I don't feel like I have to how do I say it? It makes sense to me, so I don't feel like I have to justify it too much. Yeah,
I get that. I get exactly what you're saying. It's funny because like I'm so hard on myself when it comes to stuff, and then I have my oldest son who is 13, and he's a hockey player, and I kind of take what I've done in life and I kind of try to apply it to lessons for him. And he's like, well, this didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I was like, okay, but that was one shift. What'd you do the next shift? Yeah. He's like, well, I did this. I'm like, it's two different things now.
Yeah.
Just because you see it in a moment like this doesn't mean it can't be like this by the end.
Well, and like I talk about that idea of what do you want out of your arts practice? Like, what are you trying to achieve? And it can be as simple as like making money. That's fine if that's the case. Like, I mean, but I would prefer people were honest with themselves about that. Like, I do make money from my arts practice, but I don't make money as my arts practice. So I don't really sell my work very much. I kind of make projects that have these bigger kind of impacts on the arts ecology through statements and through publicity, and it kind of influences the way people are thinking about things. But there's not really any product to like kind of buy afterwards. And that's why wrestling is so different for me. Like it is very much like lets people buy things and lets people be part of it, and it's very different in that way where so it's like I have a performance I'm doing on Parliament Hill on November 18th, which is called, what is it called? It's called the Arts Commission of Canada, and I'm going to be wearing like a powdered wig and judge's robes and like have like white face with little makeup on to make it look like I'm like some kind of Victorian dandy. And I'll be reading excerpts of the Massey Commission report, which was like the 1951 report that defined the entire art sector for Canada. And then, calling upon the Canadian government to do another commission, because it's been like 75 years and they probably should just not be basing the way we do things off of something so freaking old. But I'm not going to get paid anything to do that. I don't have any grants for it, but it's to me it's like advocating for things I care about. And it's the larger communication where it's like, by doing that, different arts organizations that I know will be able to use that as a reference point to kind of push harder on government to kind of try to prioritize the arts sector. It might get a little bit of publicity, might not, but more importantly, it'll get this idea I have of like what I want, like kind of out. And there is something kind of strange about like, I don't know. I've read articles about how like the art, being an artist is almost like a form of mental illness, and how like there's there are artists out there that will buy art materials instead of buying groceries, and that's like the idea of them hurting themselves by doing so is almost like how it can be defined that way. But and I agree in one form that is like I have these ideas that I want to do something, and it's about communicating, and it's about helping the people I care about. And when I have that idea, it just sits in my mind until I can do it and get it out. So otherwise I just sit there and I'm like, I gotta go get this powdered wig, and I gotta go do this thing where I complain about how outdated the policy for the arts of Canada are. And I gotta talk in an old timely voice where I'll be like, what is it? The nature of the task at hand. Our task has been neither modest in scope nor simple in character, and it'll be like ridiculous, and people will laugh, and there'll be photos, but in the end, poking fun at the federal government, maybe you'll get them to listen to people who say, well, now do this, it's the right thing, and they'll be like, oh, okay, who knows.
Yeah, I mean, you're better off for it than I am, because I'll take a whole different approach at that, but that's not your
Yeah, it wouldn't happen to be strong arming them, would it?
I cannot say that or deny that, or no. But like you said, like, are we doing this? I've been asked many times, oh, why do you do these interviews? Why do you do a podcast? You're not making money. I'm not.
No.
What do you want me to say? I'm not. Do I want to? Sure. Everybody wants to make a profit off something they love, 100%, because then it's not work, right? But at the end of the day, I'm doing this because I love it. I'm passionate about it. I enjoy talking to many people of all walks of life, no matter what you do.
Yep.
I'm a very social person to a degree, and this is a great way to do it. And I get to learn about a one-on-one conversation. Why not?
No, I think it's great, and it's a great outlet. I'm also really excited to see the trajectory of the show and where things have been headed. So I'm happy to see it growing as well.
Well, I mean, I would be remiss, and I've said this to you personally, and I'll say it live for everybody to hear. If it's not for you and Josh Bain, I got to give credit to both of you. I did one interview with Spotlight with Shadow, one time, and then I got it introduced to you guys a couple of years ago, randomly, very random. We're at a beach setting, very random people. They were talking about something, and then I started like, "Oh, what's this?" And then I yammered into them, and this is began a 2.5, 3-year relationship now.
Yeah,
and Clayton was instrumental in getting me creatively going to be like, shit, okay, I could do this. And then I interviewed Dan, and then Josh, then you and Tommy, and then it just kept snowballing. And now it's this thing where people are actually getting it and be like, hey, what's this? And I'm getting different people from different places of the world being like, let's do it. And I owe a lot of that to you and Josh.
Well, it's all mutual, man. Like we're only speaking our minds when we say these things to you. So like it's there's a part of me that's like when I meet all the people in your circle and everyone's caring and putting it in time and effort for the right reasons. I think a lot of people see that, and that's the other part of that too, is that there's how do I say it? I talk about this like in relation to my own art sometimes, like where like galleries, right? And, it's a building, it's walls. Usually they're museums or public art galleries, or artist run centers are kind of more like the indie scrappy kid version or of like a institution. They're a little bit more like collective focus, a little bit more fun. But the reason why I say that is that like when I go in as an artist or a curator, I try to think about like relationships, and I try to think about how, like, I remember when I was growing up, I could do like a painting or drawing or something like as a kid, as a child, and I could like give that to my grandmother, And she would look at it and she would tell me how good it is. But like, if it wasn't really like, she didn't think I did a lot of hard work, she wouldn't like put it up on the fridge in the kitchen. It was like only if you really did good, she would do that. It was like kind of like you really had to work for it. But the reason why you wanted that is that the fridge in the kitchen of my grandmother's house is where all the family gatherings would take place. So like all the aunts and uncles, all of my cousins, everybody, like these, we'd have this huge table and we'd all be like in front of this fridge. And if your artwork was the one that was on that fridge, it's like you were kind of like the center of attention. Like you know, all the people you care about, the most important people in your life, those are the people that are sitting there and actually see it and reflect on, oh, that you did that, oh, that looks good, you know. So it's like it's this weird kind of family centered thing where it's like the people that I cared about were the ones that get to see the work, as opposed to, you know, bigger museums, for instance. It's not like personal. It's like an institution. You're putting your work up and then just strangers are seeing it and they say they hate it or they love it, and that's fine. But like, I try very hard to create that environment of kind of feeling like the reason why we're doing this is to show the people we care about what we're doing, not the larger anonymous groups of people who don't care what we're doing. And I feel like that energy has a lot of power and is holding a lot of space in the things that a lot of people are doing today. You know, like that idea of like, you know why you do what you do, you know why you say the things you say. And the people who hear that and you know, it echoes in a way that makes sense to them, those are the people that you want to be paying attention to this and to be part of your, you know, your channel and your show. And those that don't, like, they should just move on. They'll find what works for them. And that, I think, is more interesting and kind of how do I say it, it's more attractive than things that have like millions of people watching them, but you don't really care about any of it. It's just generic and, you know, kind of garbage. But
That's the world today, right? It's who can get the views, who can get the likes, who can get the hearts, whatever the hell you want to call it. 5 people watch this, that's 5 people that watched it. That's
100%.
You know what I mean? Like, that's how I view it. And I've never been deferred by any of that. Like, am I a smaller podcast interviewer? 100%. I know that. But it doesn't defer me from going out and trying to swing big.
Yeah.
You know, like you can't let things stop you. And I feel like that's where me and you find a sense of common ground is in the art world. That's you. You're going out with the big swing. One way or another, you're still going to land something. It might be the littlest punch, but you're still landing.
That's true.
Not a big punch. And if it comes down to the smallest thing, all right, cool. We're doing this. Let's keep going. Let's keep this momentum going.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. I mean, like, one thing I'll say, and this is but just kind of like a strange aspect of like me wanting to bring some of my own practice into this discussion a little bit, which is like, when I was younger, I really used to kind of like hustle harder when it came to, like, you know, if I'd go work for a festival, I'd be like really kind of being like, well, how much am I getting paid for this? And really pressuring them to kind of like prove to me that I was getting paid something I was worth. And that's fine. I mean, that I'm never going to say that artists shouldn't be paid for their time, because I believe that they should. But as I got older, I started to become more like, less about that and more like, what is being offered and how do I do the most with what's being offered to get the most out of it for both myself, but also for the kind of like the people that have asked me to come in. And the reason for that is it's kind of like their success is your success at that point too. And that, like, and seeing it from that side of it, there was a big change. I want to say it was like 2017, where I got asked to go do a residency in Montreal at the Viva Arts Action Festival doing performance art. And I had done performance art many times before, but I'd usually kind of just pull something together. And I know that sounds a little sloppy, but I'm like, you know, I always have all these big statements and things that are kind of half finished, and I would draw upon them and just kind of pull one together. And it wasn't like there was any problems with that. It's just more like that was the way I would do things. And this time I decided to do it differently, where I would be like, I'm really going to commit to spending the time really thinking about what this needs to be. I'm not going to go in with a plan other than like a few little things. And I'm going to talk with the people that are running the festival and kind of ask them like what they want. And I was going to be there for 2 weeks. So when I was getting ready to leave, I said, I'm getting ready to bring some materials, but I'm not sure what to bring. And I don't know that much about the venue that we're doing this show in. Could you tell me? And they're like, you could do anything you want in here. I'm like, yeah, everyone says you can do everything you want. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can. And they're like, no, you can. And I'm like, so if I wanted to like light a structure on fire and burn it to the ground, I could do that. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, what? And they were like, no, like this is a decommissioned like machine shop. Like this is like it'll have like 400 to 500 people there, but like the venue is a fireproof venue. It's for welding. It's for doing those kind of things. Like you have the capacity to like have fire in here. Like you could do that. And I was like so caught off guard by the fact that they said that it's like I just couldn't stop thinking about what it would be like to actually burn something as performance art. And then I started working on the project, which ended up being called Slag Lines, and it was about my relationship to my father. And I took and made a life-size paper mache version of myself, and I trained on how to be a fire breather, so that I could fire breathe onto myself and burn myself to the ground. And I did that at that event, but it's like it took everything I had to do that, and I gave that festival everything I could. And I was there for 2 weeks on site working, and I think I got paid like, I don't know, $600 or something, which is great, but it's also like, no, it's not for 2 weeks of work on site.
Work now. Like,
if I was looking at his work, but like what I got out of that work was so big in comparison. And again, it's like you have to take and look at everything as an opportunity, and what is that opportunity giving you? And then if you can't take an opportunity because you've got bills to pay, then don't take the opportunity. But don't blame the person offering you the opportunity. It's not their fault that you have bills to pay, right? Like this is the strange situation of kind of shifting the way I look at things. And I use that as an example because it's like there were so many things that came out of that event. Like I had a review in Canadian Art Magazine of my work, which was in the issue that was the last issue Canadian Art Magazine ever published, because then they closed down because magazines are dying. But it's just like this weird thing. It's like every step of the way, it sounds like it ages me and it dates me so much, right? Like all these things being like, hey, remember print-based magazines? Someday they could.
I really do. I miss picking up a paper magazine and reading it, but
I know I'd love to imagine that they'll make a comeback, but with the way that the news is going, and the way that like AI is generating content at such a level that it's just the idea that people are going to pay money for something written by a human being and printed on paper, when some other company is going to generate that for nothing from a computer and have it look almost as good. I think the whole thing is falling downhill. Yeah.
The times change, technology's there, right? The Jetsons taught us a lot of things.
They did. They taught us how robots are terrifying and that dogs can talk just like on Scooby-Doo.
Now, I'm sure we could continue this conversation for hours, and we're gonna do that in a few weeks when we meet up, and we're gonna do some hard work together here on the road. But I am gonna cut you off here because I feel like there's more in-depth stories that we can get while we're in person recording.
Sure.
So I want you now to plug everything you possibly can. Any art show you got coming up you want people to attend, any seminars you're going to be speaking at, anything you want to do, including a wrestling step if you wish. Plug away.
Sure. So I'll do art stuff, and then I'll do wrestling stuff. Art stuff. There is an exhibition coming up at the Durham Public Art Gallery in Durham, Ontario. It is going to be opening on November 30th. It is called Conceptualizing Local. and it is a group of artists from the area, as well as some from my area up here, as well as some from outside of Canada, all working alongside each other to kind of talk about their own practice. And then you get to see how those works look in relation to each other, and it should be a lot of fun. I also, as I was saying, have a piece that's going to be like a performance art piece in Ottawa on the November 18th. And I'm just going to throw a shout out to the Ontario College of Art and Design, where I've been teaching in the interdisciplinary art media design program. And the students there have been doing such great work. I'm hopefully going to be announcing some sort of minor symposium taking place in Toronto within the next couple months, and then doing some work with the students there, maybe doing wrestling in Toronto. I'm not sure, but I haven't figured that part of it out yet, but it's going to be fun no matter what. So a lot of short-term art stuff. There's lots of art stuff next year too, but I'm not going to get into stuff that's so far away. And then wrestling. Oh my gosh. So Rusty has a hardcore title match in All-Star Wrestling in Vancouver on November 2nd coming up against Big Rig. And I'm excited to see how Rusty debuts in BC. I've never been to Vancouver as a wrestler before, but I have some family out there, so I'm really excited to see them as well and to wrestle. November 19th's got Something Wicked, which Tommy and I are going to be defending our belts against the Gutter Dogs, which the Gutter Dogs, if you're not aware of them, one of them is Rush Rancid, who I've had many matches with, and then the other one is Julian White, who is my cousin, Rusty Blackwell's kind of disgruntled, angry mechanic cousin who is really grouchy and scrappy. So I have no idea how that match is going to go. And then I am going to be in the Rumble to Remember on November 16th in Winnipeg. So I'm going out to be part of a 50-person Rumble, which is CWE, Canadian Wrestling Elite's largest wrestling show of the year. I'm excited about that, and I'll be out in Winnipeg for a couple days ahead of time to go do some work in the art sector and meet with people at Art City, because I have a residency that I'll be working on in Winnipeg in February of next year. And then, last but not least, the same day that the Conceptualizing Local exhibition opens at the Durham Art Gallery, there is a awesome show taking place that Northland has taking place in Durham. And Shadow, what is the name of that show? Do you know what the name is?
I believe it's presented by Off the Top Media. And
yes,
Road Rage.
That's right, Road Rage. Yes. So I'm going to see you then as well. So it's going to be me being at an opening of an exhibition that I curated during the day, and then changing outfits and going down the street and wrestling, and hopefully bringing everybody at the art show in the gallery to see the wrestling as well. So it'll be a very interesting day watching those two worlds collide.
I don't like doing this, but I have to do this. Ladies and gentlemen, I will correct something that Rusty said. Something Wicked is October 19th, not November.
What did I say? Did I say night? Oh,
it's October 19th.
It's in 2 days. It's not. It's not in a month.
I don't want to be that guy, but I thought I just give the proper, because I know.
No, it's okay. It's okay. And if and when all the people from Northland watch this, they'll be like, we have to correct Rusty all the time. Hence why Rusty is in fact an extension of Clayton. He constantly needs to be corrected.
Well, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, like I like to say, support your indie friends, support your local artists, support all your artists across the board. Make sure, even if you just walk through the gallery and say hello, make someone's day that's worked hard on something they've taken years to make, weeks to make, months to make. It doesn't matter. Just pop in, say hello. It brightens their day. And if you're a professional wrestling fan, make sure to check out Rusty at all that he has coming up. With that being said, I am Shadow. This is Clayton. Thank you for tuning in to Spotlight with Shadow. Good night.